The airport terminal buzzed with the low murmur of delayed flights, flickering gate signs, and that familiar smell of burnt coffee drifting from a nearby kiosk. Gate 42 was packed. Shoulders brushed. Voices rose. Phones clutched like lifelines. It was chaos in motion. But in the middle of it all, she stood still. Rachel Carter, 32. Denim jacket slung over one arm, boarding pass in hand. Watching a man across from her like time had just paused. He looked completely drained. Hair mussed. Shirt wrinkled. A red-faced baby crying in his arms, while he struggled to keep a diaper bag from slipping off his shoulder. Everything about him said exhausted. But the way he held that baby? Steady, gentle, patient. Final boarding for Flight 217 to Denver, the gate agent called. Rachel Carter, this is your final call. She looked down at her boarding pass, then looked back at him. A baby bottle slipped from his bag and rolled across the floor. He didn't even notice. His full attention was on calming his child. A nearby passenger glanced at him, then looked away. Rachel didn't. She stepped forward, calm, composed, and leaned into the gate agent. Is there any way to give up my seat? She asked softly. That man over there. He looks like he's struggling. If he's on standby or missed boarding, maybe you could give him my spot. The agent blinked. You want to give up your seat? For him? Yes, Rachel said. If it helps, I can take the next flight. A few quick keystrokes. Then a nod. He's on standby. We'll move him up. The man looked up, confused, as he was suddenly waved toward the gate. The baby was still fussing, but he managed a grateful, almost stunned, nod in her direction. He didn't know what she'd done. She just offered a small, quiet smile, and turned back to the waiting area. Her chest rose with something unfamiliar. Maybe it was quiet satisfaction, or something she didn't even have a name for yet. She didn't know his name, didn't know his story, and he didn't know that fate had just shifted for both of them. Sometimes, the smallest kindness can rewrite everything. Stay with us. This story is just beginning. But before we dive in, make sure to like the video and hit that subscribe button. It helps us create more stories like this. Rachel leaned against the wall near gate 42, her eyes following the man as he disappeared down the jet bridge. Baby on his shoulder, boarding pass in hand. He never looked back. She wasn't expecting him to. That wasn't the point. The terminal buzzed around her. Boarding calls, cell phones, a toddler shrieking at a vending machine. But her world had gone strangely quiet. Still, a moment suspended between what was and what might follow. Unbelievable. A sharp voice cut through the white noise. Rachel turned. A woman in her early 50s, red lipstick perfectly drawn, designer carry-on in tow, stood a few feet away, arms folded. Her ID badge glinted. Marilyn Stone, VP, Harpertech Group. You gave up your seat? For him. Marilyn's voice dripped with judgment, like she'd just watched someone leave a diamond ring in a restroom. Rachel straightened slightly, unsure whether to explain or ignore her. I mean, look at him, barely keeping it together. And you hand him a first-class ticket like this is some kind of feel-good movie. It wasn't first class, Rachel said softly. Oh please, Marilyn scoffed. You're lucky they even let you do that. People pay thousands to rebook last minute. Rachel nodded, polite but firm. He had a baby. He needed the seat more than I did. Marilyn clicked her tongue and shifted her bag with practiced entitlement. You're either naive or rich enough not to care. Which is it? Neither, Rachel thought, but didn't say. I'll catch the next one, she replied instead. The agent called for standby volunteers. Rachel's name wasn't on the list. It might be hours before she could get another flight. Rachel walked toward a quiet spot by the window and sat, letting her backpack slide to the floor beside her. Her phone buzzed. Text from her sister, asking about arrival time. She typed out, small delay. I'll be on the next flight. Don't worry. She didn't mention the dad, or the baby, or the faint trace of formula on her sleeve where the child had brushed her. She didn't usually get involved. Not like that. But something about the man, his quiet presence, the way he rocked the baby without complaint, had stirred something old and aching in her chest. A memory not sharp enough to be called a flashback, but strong enough to settle like mist. She thought of her mother, single, struggling, holding it all together with duct tape and determination. Rachel remembered the night her mom gave up a waitressing shift, just to sit beside her during a fever, despite needing that tip money for groceries. Kindness passed down, silently. The terminal door opened with a soft hiss. He stepped back inside. Rachel blinked. Confused. He was still holding the baby, now asleep, head tucked against his chest. The man looked around briefly, before spotting her by the window. Their eyes met. He walked toward her. He began, stopping a few feet away. I just wanted to say thank you. For earlier. Rachel smiled faintly. You're welcome. Is everything okay? They were about to close the door, and the agent told me someone gave up their seat. I didn't know what to say. I had no idea it was you. I figured you needed the seat more than I did, she said simply. I do, but I couldn't take it. He shifted the baby slightly. I told them no, that it didn't feel right. You bought your ticket. I can wait. Rachel blinked. You gave it back? He nodded, almost sheepish. You didn't have to. I know, but you didn't have to give it to me either. A pause stretched between them, filled with low airport sounds. He extended his hand. James Reeve. Rachel Carter. She took his hand. Warm, steady. A small pause lingered. Too long to be accidental. Before they let go. You always make a habit of saving strangers in airports, he asked, half a smile tugging at his lips. Only the exhausted ones with diaper bags, she said, matching the smile. And maybe some karmic debt to work off. His eyes softened. Well, that makes two of us. The baby stirred, murmuring. James adjusted the little one's position with ease, murmuring something low and reassuring. His hand brushed the baby's head gently, and Rachel felt something unexpected turn over in her chest. Is she yours? Rachel asked softly. He nodded. Maya. Just turned 1. Her mom. He hesitated. She's not around anymore. I'm sorry. James looked out the window, not quite seeing the tarmac. She passed away 4 months ago. Maya's been everything since. Rachel nodded, not pressing. I haven't flown with her alone before. We were visiting my parents for a few days. I guess I didn't realize how hard it would be. People stare. Like I'm doing it wrong. You weren't, Rachel said. You were calm. That matters more than people think. Their eyes met again. This time longer. Gratefully silent. Mr. Reeve. A voice cut through their moment. A second gate agent approached. This one more formal, more alert. We've rebooked you for the next flight, in 2 hours. Upgraded to business class. Courtesy of the airline for the confusion earlier. Thank you, James said. That's perfect. The agent nodded and walked off. He turned back to Rachel. Can I buy you a coffee? While we wait. She hesitated. But only for a second. Only if I get to pick the place. The kiosk stuff is basically burnt sadness. He laughed. Deal. As they walked toward the coffee stand at the end of the terminal. Maya stirred and opened one sleepy eye. Rachel offered a small wave. The baby blinked, then slowly reached a tiny hand toward her, fingers curled. James glanced down at his daughter. She doesn't usually do that with strangers. Rachel just smiled. Maybe she remembers kindness. 2 hours later, the gate for Flight 275 to Denver was boarding. Rachel, coffee cup in hand, stood quietly by the overhead screens, while James shifted Maya's weight in his arms. The baby was drowsy but awake, gumming a teether, and occasionally staring at Rachel like she was a familiar constellation. James had offered to sit together, but Rachel declined. If we're meant to talk more, we'll both end up delayed again, she'd said with a wink. He laughed, just enough to mean it. Their quiet bubble was about to burst anyway. Mr. Reeve. A crisp voice called from nearby. They both turned. The woman from earlier, Marilyn Stone, vice president at Harper Tech, strode toward them, this time flanked by 2 sharply dressed assistants. She was all business, armed with a Bluetooth headset, and the confidence of someone used to winning. Rachel froze. James straightened. Mr. Reeve, Marilyn repeated. Smile tight. You've been impossible to reach. Rachel glanced between them, slowly connecting dots. I told my assistant I wasn't checking email until Monday, James replied. Cool but firm. I'm still on personal leave. Marilyn's gaze flicked to Maya, then Rachel, then back. Right. Personal. Her voice sharpened like polished steel. You're due in Denver tonight for the merger debrief. The board's waiting. Rachel's grip tightened slightly on her coffee cup. James said nothing. Not for a moment. Then, the board can wait. Rachel blinked, caught off guard not just by his tone, but by what he'd just revealed. Board. Merger. This wasn't a tired single dad in row 18. This was James Reeve, CEO of Reeve Tech Systems. Multi-millionaire. Tech world ghost legend. She remembered now. She'd seen the name in passing, tucked inside a headline she'd never clicked on. Marilyn stepped forward, lowering her voice. You're risking control of your own company. You think the investors are going to trust a man who delays strategy meetings because of a baby and... She shot a glance at Rachel. Personal detours? Rachel stiffened. James's jaw worked. Silently. Then Rachel stepped forward. Not dramatically, just enough to shift the dynamic. I think, she said, voice calm and steady, that if investors don't trust a man who knows how to take care of his child before his profit margins, maybe they're betting on the wrong leader. Silence. Marilyn stared, as if seeing Rachel for the first time, and for the first time, had no immediate retort. James looked at Rachel. Something shifted in his expression. Quiet gratitude, admiration. Something gentler than words. Maya reached for Rachel's sleeve again, gurgling. Rachel offered her finger, and the baby gripped it tightly. Marilyn broke the silence. You're just, what a nanny. Rachel met her eyes without flinching. No, just someone who didn't walk away when it was inconvenient. James exhaled slowly. You can tell the board I'll be there. In the morning. Virtually. If they can't wait that long. Maybe they're not the right partners. Marilyn hesitated. Lips pursed. Then turned. Heels snapping against the tile as she walked away, murmuring orders to her assistants. They stood in the quiet that followed. Rachel gently disentangled her hand from Maya's. I didn't mean to speak for you, she said softly. No, James said. You said exactly what I should have. A pause. The overhead speaker announced final boarding. They walked toward the gate together, neither speaking, until they reached the jet bridge. James turned to her, lowering his voice. You knew who I was. After she said it. I figured it out, she admitted. But it doesn't change anything. No. She shrugged. You were still the man rocking a baby in a crowded terminal. Still the guy who gave the seat back, even when you needed it. He smiled. Just barely. Most people would have treated me differently. You're not most people, she said. Neither am I. They stood there for a breath too long. Passengers streaming past them. Rachel shifted her weight. So this merger. He groaned. Don't ruin the moment. She laughed quietly. James glanced down at Maya, then back at her. Can I call you? When we land. If you're not permanently allergic to boardrooms and baby wipes. She smiled. I don't mind either. But don't lead with your net worth next time. His voice softened. I won't have to. A beat. Just the two of them. The world around them continued in motion. But their moment stood still. Then James did something small, but certain. He reached out and gently brushed his thumb over a faint smear of formula on Rachel's sleeve. His fingers lingered. Barely. Just long enough to mean something. Rachel didn't pull away. She just looked at him. No dramatic kiss. No swelling music. Just eye contact that said, I see you now. And maybe, I want to keep seeing you. The seatbelt sign had been off for nearly an hour. Flight 275 floated through smooth skies. The hum of the engines a low, steady comfort. James sat quietly in business class. Maya finally asleep against his chest. Her small breaths warm against his shirt. One hand supported her back. The other rested idly on the folded blanket across his lap. He wasn't working. His tablet screen was black. His phone had been silenced. Instead, he was thinking. About her. Rachel. She hadn't asked for anything. Not recognition. Not gratitude. Not even conversation. And yet, she'd given more in a few hours than most people had offered him in years. She saw him. Not the company. Not the title. Not the press photos or financials. Just him. A man trying to do the right thing, while holding a bottle in one hand, and a boardroom in the other. And she'd stepped in without blinking. A few rows back, Rachel sat by the window, legs tucked slightly sideways. A notebook open on her tray table. She wasn't writing, just tracing the same corner. Over and over. With her pen. Something had shifted on that terminal floor. Not just with James. With herself. For so long, she'd kept her life small. Safe. Her days were a rotation of freelance copy gigs, late-night tea, and holding people's stories, without ever letting anyone touch hers. She didn't offer opinions in rooms. That didn't ask for them. But today she had. With a voice. She didn't even know she'd missed. The image of Marilyn's face, momentarily speechless, played over in her mind. Not in triumph, but in quiet awe. She had spoken, and people had listened. The fasten seatbelt sign pinged softly. They were descending. Rachel tucked her notebook away and fastened her belt. The clouds outside thinned, revealing the Denver skyline in the dusky light, sharp against the fading gold of early evening. As the wheels touched down, and the cabin jolted gently, she let out a breath. She didn't know she'd been holding. She didn't expect anything more from James. He had a baby, a company, a life full of decisions, far more complex than chance airport conversations. Still, when they all filed out into the terminal, and she saw him waiting, just past the jet bridge, Maya now snug in a carrier across his chest, she felt something flutter, slow and surprising. He stepped toward her. "I was hoping to catch you before you vanished again." She raised an eyebrow, smiling. "You worried I'd slip away without letting you pay for that coffee. I owe you a bit more than coffee." Rachel glanced down at Maya, who was still sound asleep. "I think she did most of the hard work." James chuckled, rubbing the baby's back gently. Then he looked up again, more serious. "I meant what I said about wanting to talk more. Not because of what happened with Marilyn. Not because you stepped in, but because I don't meet many people who say what they think without trying to sell it." Rachel's smile softened. "I don't meet many people who actually listen." They stood there a moment longer, passengers flowing around them, like a river around two steady rocks. Then, from the edge of the crowd, a familiar click of heels. Marilyn. But this time, her expression wasn't steel and sharp angles. It was measured. She approached slowly, nodded at Rachel. "Ms. Carter." Rachel returned the nod. "Ms. Stone." There was a beat. "I owe you an apology," Marilyn said. The words were crisp, but genuine. "I misjudged you. And your instincts." Rachel tilted her head slightly. "You were protecting your priorities. I just had different ones." Marilyn glanced at James. Then Maya. "I've worked with this man for 7 years. I've seen him land billion-dollar deals on 4 hours of sleep. I didn't think he needed defending." "He didn't," Rachel said. "Just a moment to breathe." Marilyn's lips twitched, just enough to count as a softened smile. She extended a card to Rachel. "If you're ever in the market for something beyond freelance work, we could use people who don't flinch when things get loud." Rachel took the card, surprised. "Thank you." Marilyn turned to James. "Flight to New York leaves at 8. I'll prep the call." Then she was gone, absorbed by the tide of travelers. Rachel looked at the card, then back at James. "I didn't do it for this," she said quickly. "I know." His voice was quiet. "That's why it matters." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, a folded page torn from a notepad. On it, his name, his number, and one simple line in handwriting that leaned a little to the right. "If you ever want to finish that coffee or start something else." She took it. No rush, no pressure, just possibility. Rachel looked up, meeting his gaze. A brief silence stretched between them, soft, full, and quietly electric. Then she smiled. "Next time, I'm buying." James smiled back, eyes warm. "Next time." He reached out, and, for just a moment, gently touched her wrist. Nothing more, just the warmth of contact and the steady beat of something beginning beneath it. 3 weeks later, the conference room at Harper Tech's Denver office was filled with soft murmurs and the rustle of paper. Sunlight streamed in through tall windows, casting long shadows over the boardroom table where half a dozen department leads waited, coffee in hand, digital pads at the ready. At the head of the room sat Rachel Carter, not standing awkwardly by the wall, not scribbling notes in the corner. Sitting, present, heard. She was technically still a consultant, brought in temporarily to rework the company's internal communication systems, but that didn't stop people from leaning in when she spoke. "I think," she said evenly, "if you want transparency from your teams, you need to be willing to show the human side of leadership. Real tone, real words, not just legal filters and buzzwords." Silence. Then a slow nod from one manager. Then another. Someone across the table smiled. "It's strange. You sound more like an insider than a hire." Rachel shrugged, scribbling something into her notes. "I'm not wearing the corporate badge yet, but I'm watching, listening. Sometimes that's how you learn what needs to change." Laughter, low and warm. Even Marilyn, seated across from her, smirked, noted. It wasn't just respect. It was trust now. Rachel felt it. Bone deep. Not performative. Not symbolic. Earned. Later that afternoon, the offices quieted. Most people had gone home early. It was Friday, and someone had declared an unofficial early out. Rachel lingered behind, packing up her notes into a tote bag. She walked through the halls slowly, past glass doors and cubicles, where she had once felt invisible. Now people nodded when they saw her, stopped her in the hallway with questions. Listened when she answered. She didn't need a title. She'd found her voice. And more than that, people had finally started listening. Near the lobby, a familiar voice called her name. James stood by the window wall, Maya on his hip, wearing a tiny pair of headphones, and gently bopping her head to whatever lullaby playlist was playing. Rachel smiled as she crossed the room. "You two stalking me again?" she teased. "Guilty," James said, grinning. "But technically, you're the one who's always here now. I like the work. And they're actually listening. You're not surprised?" "I'm surprised I'm not surprised," she said. "Feels natural now." He shifted Maya to the other side and handed Rachel a paper bag. "Lunch. From that sandwich place you liked at the airport." Rachel took it, eyebrows raised. "You remembered?" "I remember most things you say, even the quiet stuff." She paused, searching his face. There was no showiness, no grand romantic declaration. Just the soft, open presence of a man who had learned how to hold space for his daughter, for himself, and maybe now, for someone else. Rachel stepped closer, brushing a crumb from Maya's onesie. The baby reached for her, familiar. Now, and without hesitation, Rachel held out her arms. Maya settled into her like she'd always been there. James watched them both. Quietly. No rush. No agenda. Just a moment. "I told the board today," he said after a beat, "that I'm stepping back a little." Rachel looked up. "I'll still lead," he said, "but I want more time like this. With her. And maybe." He stopped himself. Rachel didn't press. Instead, she just gave him a soft smile. "You don't need to finish that sentence. I already heard it." His gaze lingered. There was no need to say more. She was here. He was here. And that was enough. They stepped outside into the Colorado afternoon, golden sunlight spilling over the sidewalk. Maya, now fully alert, pointed at a squirrel darting across the path, gurgling in delight. Rachel laughed, and James looked at her, not in surprise, not in awe, but with recognition, of someone who saw the world like he did, of someone who stayed, even when it would have been easier to walk. He reached for Rachel's hand, not dramatic, not rushed, just a simple gesture of presence. She took it, their fingers curled together. No promises spoken, no declarations shouted, just the soft, certain beginning of something real. Together, they walked toward the parking lot, side by side. And somewhere behind them, change was already taking root, in the company, in the people they'd touched, in the quiet ways respect shifts power and kindness builds futures.